about doing live streams more. It's been on my mind, and just doing more video recording in general. How can I bring my experience and my perspective to the community and how I can help people? And I've thrown out a couple ideas over, last few months doing product reviews. I did a live stream a couple weeks ago about a set breakdown. And I just, I'm a perfectionist. I want things to be perfect. So I thought about what I wanted to do to make it more of like an official program, but ultimately, like, I just want to get out here and talk to people, connect, and make a good connection with you. So I'm jumped on today, and for me, I'm a big person that, like, I like challenges and putting myself into uncomfortable situations. So like I put myself on like this challenge to do a live every day for 14 days. So at least 30 minutes, and it's going to be pretty much around those topics, around grocery for, say, could be either a set breakdown, or it could be talking about any kind of buyer interaction or topic, helping the sales reps out there. Or it could just be a product review. That's what I've thought about doing, where there's a lot of people that do product reviews from the consumer's perspective. And certainly I would have my own, thoughts about what a product looks like from a consumer, but I also have a different perspective being in the seat as a buyer for so many years. So that's the part that not a lot of people see or talk through and think through, when they are seeing these consumer reviews. So I think that's a really cool one. I'm excited to do that one. I haven't really, again, like, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, where I will actually take it. So I just wanted to start. That's one of my biggest things, is wanting things to be perfect before getting started. So we're doing live. We're doing 14 days live, at least 30 minutes. I don't have a set time that I'm going to do it, but I will be going every day consistently. And today just happens to be about a LinkedIn post I made a couple days ago, and for whatever reason, it blew up. It's got almost 19,000 views and over 150 comments. So there's a lot of interactions and sentiment about nut butter for some reason. So I just thought I would come on, share my screen. We'll look through the post itself, look at the picture. I can read through some of the comments and actually give you my take on it, as a buyer. And, just open it up for general comments. So if you're in here and you're live, feel free to put some comments or put questions into the chat, and I'll answer them as I go. But for now, let's just get into the set. Let me share my screen really quick. All right. All right. So this is the post. Very simple. 2 days ago, I put a picture of an 8-foot nut butter set. It's got some honey on top, and I just asked what the first thing that comes to mind is. And it feels like these are getting a lot of good interaction and traction. So far, I've done it with 3 different sets. The first one was grab and go beverage. Then I did yogurt, and now nut butter. And what's funny to me is that, as a natural buyer in my past experience, I really liked having a lot of variety. Not overkill where everything is single faced, but we wanted to bring in new and exciting items constantly. But we also have to support the good sellers, right? And so what that ended up with was, this environment that I was in shaped me to not be afraid of variety. And it's funny looking at all these comments. We'll go through them, but there's at least, I would say 50 to probably like 75% of the comments are saying how there's too much variety. But there are a couple other key call outs from here, just like general themes from the comments. We'll get into the specifics here, but you can see it right here. Too busy. Rule of 17s. I actually don't know what rule of 17s is, so I'm going to reply to this one here really quick. If you've heard of the rule of 17s, feel free to put it into the chat so we can share it with everybody. I don't know if I should be, like, should I know this as a buyer? Uh-oh. What happened? Didn't take. All right, let's do this. Care to explain the rule of 17s. Cool. So one of the other things that I noticed, very, very common sentiment was not just that it was over skewed, but everything looks the same practically. And I do have to agree with that. I do have, let me pull up a different picture here so you can see it better and I can zoom in. This is more clear and you can see from a buyer, I understand, and this is the store that I used to work at, right? Like this is the retailer, so I understand it from prior knowledge that peanut butter generally lives here on the left side, and then you have your nut butters and your other like alternatives, almond, cashew, sunflower, etc. And as a consumer, if you look at this, it's really not easy to tell. You know, some brands do it better, very big font in the actual type that it is. So peanut butter is very clear to read from the new season's label. Almond butter, cashew butter. You gotta zoom in a little bit here. But when you start looking down at the Justins or the Adams, like I know Adams doesn't make an almond butter, so everything here is going to be peanut butter, but a customer might not know that. Or the Justins, they do have peanut and almond butter. It's kind of hard to tell unless you really like zoom in what's going on here. You know, like which one's honey. Like it's got a cute little design, but I think personally that could be a lot bolder. And looking at this set, hearing all the comments, I think most. Sorry, I'm like bouncing all over the place. I think most people would agree that there's a lot of sameness. How many varieties do you need of peanut butter? There's something to it from a buyer's side of it too, where it's not just about having, only two options of peanut butter. There's other things going on and they help the buyer in their hitting their goals with the category. So hitting KPIs in certain areas with sales margin and profitability. When you really break it down, yes, you could shrink this down. You could only carry 3 or 4 brands of peanut butter and you're going to move more units of that. But there's other aspects of it too. This store, New Seasons, it's naturally focused. It's typically known to be a little bit higher price. So when you bring in more variety, you have some new options that are differentiated from the market. You have different opportunities for items to be on sale and really to provide a value to the customer in multiple time frames throughout the year through different brands, and it helps with getting the margin, right? Like getting your profitability when you have more brands paying into the programs and the ads. And that's just a fact of it, whether people want to talk about this or not. That's the way it works in a lot of retailers, is that you have multiple buckets, just like a brand has multiple buckets of what they can spend, right? Like they can spend X amount on cost of goods and your discount of product. Then they have X amount that they can spend on e-com. They have X amount that they can spend on shopper marketing of some sort. So there's lots of different buckets that the retailer is trying to fill. And each retailer is going to be different. They're all going to have different strategies, but a lot of them are going to be a combination of these pieces, right? It's not just about sales on, limited amount of brands. You can capitalize on other areas too. Check the chat really quick. Not seeing anything there. All right. So let's look through some of the comments. I think there's some really good ones here. So need to figure out this one, rule of 17s. I don't know what that is. Um, so we got 20 facings of New Season's private label nut butters, one shelf. It's overwhelming. And, I agree, but, I actually replied to this one. I said, there's 5 different types of varieties there. You have peanut butter, almond butter, creamy, crunchy, and then you have cashew butter. So, that it's easy to see the block. Personally, it's it's always interesting. Like a buyer wants the set to look appealing, right? Easy to shop and easy to identify what's what. This is just a hard set to do it, but brand blocking is really important. You can see there's a brand block here of Adams and a brand block of Woodstock and Santa Cruz, where I don't know if this is, in between resets and maybe some things happened at the store level. There's a little bit of bleeding over of certain things like the Adams. I don't think that Adams really was designed to be 5 facings. I think there's maybe an out of stock or something that the store faced over where it had a clean New Season's break with peanut butter. But when you are looking at these different areas like that, it really, you see as a customer, if somebody just on LinkedIn randomly looking at it, like 20 facings of a lot of the same. Now, what I would say is when I look at sets, now I look at it knowing if I go into Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or Safeway, it doesn't really matter. If you see an item with 5 facings or 6 facings or more, you can guarantee like that is based off of data. So they move enough of those items that they need the holding power and they want it to be the focus of the set. Now, a lot of brands want their, they want specific, sorry, a lot of retailers want specific brands to be the highlight. When you look at New Season specifically, their private label is not like anybody else's. It's not just the cheapest item. They do a really good job about finding the right partners with it that is mostly local and higher quality ingredients and recipes. So the price point is not going to be the cheapest. It's going to be the best value in overall, right? Like quality, price, and when you get that, that's why they put it at eye level. And Jif down here at the bottom, Skippy down at the bottom, there's comments about that as well. That stuff happens because of the volume, right? Like the customer at New Seasons is clearly buying enough of this and the Adams that they need more facings. And outside of those little nuanced issues or situations where, maybe there's an out of stock and somebody extended this one, like for the most part, you can go in and pretty much know like, okay, these are the top sellers by how much facings they have. All right, gonna keep scrolling down here. Got a little back and forth on that. Looks robust and clean. I would like to find a way to put CBs closer to eye level. So my guess is Keenan represents that brand. And then also this brand, Pepper 2, which I have not seen. So, I need to check that out. So this chain or thread of comments was interesting. So Timothy Peterson, he said, too many options, not enough clarity on differences, almost nothing stands out. So I think we talked about that a little bit. It's really the sea of sameness. It looks like it's a lot of the same items, and there's really not a lot of differentiation in the nut butter set in general. Like I don't know the percentage of sales when you look at just creamy, crunchy peanut butter. It's going to be a huge portion of sales in that category. And then you have the almond butter, the cashew, the sunflower, and then you have another segment of indulgence. You have, functional. So there's going to be all these different little things that pop up. And when you have such a large chunk of the category set aside to just like two main options, really peanut butter, creamy, and crunchy, I think naturally it's just going to be hard to justify the right space for some of those functional items and the alternatives, things that don't sell as much. And you maybe want to call them out in a way, but that's where it can just get tricky with when you actually set this up in a store. And so, I said, oh, sorry. So he said he works with investors and collects a lot of consumer data. Consumers do not like this sort of display. They prefer focus, explanation, maybe fewer options. So we've already talked about that. Like a lot of people that I have seen on all of my posts recently say too many options. And again, this is just a store by store decision in their strategy. It's really interesting to hear from my perspective in the natural space. I would think you would see that more often in conventional, or like Trader Joe's, does that very well. Like they only have a few options of things, but in natural, it's the lifeblood of bringing new customers and being differentiated is having new items and variety. So that's just been my experience with it. Open to hearing any comments there as well. All right, so let's see. Timothy also said there's more that consumers tell us. So this is really interesting. So eye level placement is important for product signage. This display is focused on what exactly? I would say it's focused on the new season's brand. Uh, Eye level, it's right there, easy for people to see. It's the easy grab with how many facings they have. Number two, this is all conventional and horizontal shelf filling. What engages consumers more are vertical displays, where they can catch a glance of something and look up and down the shelves. So this is also a really interesting one. I've always leaned towards more horizontal merchandising for the most part, but towards the end of my category management experience and that time, I had sets that would go vertical, and I think it just depends on the category and what your goals are, what you would hope to achieve. This one, I could see vertical blocking. It's interesting. Let me pull up the closer picture again. In theory, this is kind of vertical block of peanut butter. You have alternative alternate alternative nut butters over here. And within that, you have your vertical blocks of brands, not super vertical though. So I think what he is saying is being more vertical than just having atoms on two shelves, but maybe have it on three or four shelves right here and say four facings like that. And this is where I think there is a lot of data to show that vertical blocking like that can really help the customer. So it's going to kind of, I don't know all of the science behind it. There's a lot of data and eye tracking, all these different aspects to it. But what I've heard is that when you have vertical and you kind of start with your core items in this vertical block on the left side, they will naturally move their, like reading a book, move from left to right. And then when you put the emerging brands or functional and things like that over here, they just naturally move to that. So in theory, you could see, Jif, Skippy, Adams, kind of all being in this vertical block right here, with then the Woodstock, the Justins, the New Seasons kind of being right in this section. Now, this is great in theory. I can tell you from doing the sets themselves, when you have a planogram program up and you are moving these products around, it's just a computer program. You have every item as a block and you can move it, how many faces it has. You can move it from shelf to shelf. You can stack it, not stack it, all these things to make it come out to an actual set. When you actually get into it, it becomes much harder to find the balance between the facing count and making things look aesthetically pleasing with the right blocks. Maybe Jif has fewer items than Skippy, and that block doesn't really work out. Then you are potentially over facing a different brand just to create a block. And I think that's where sometimes horizontal helps. I do I do like doing short vertical horizontal kind of combo. It's almost like a hybrid like this Adams. Like it's not a full vertical, but if this was just blocked off right here, this would be a great little mini block, and then you could have a new seasons block right here, and that would be like a clean look from having two brands, two shelves, really symmetrical in a way. That doesn't always work out though. That's really tough to actually get, and especially when you get into the alternative set when you have so many different items in here. All right, so let's go back to the post. Timothy also said since there are too many choices, they don't appear categorized. Can't really tell in this image. A brand would stand out, looked bold and bright. Look at Jif on the bottom left and the raw honey on the top shelf. Eye tracking on this, it would be those ones that would pop. So everything else is blah. I kind of agree with that, that the packaging is blah. Doesn't really call it out easy enough for a customer to see from 4 feet away what exactly you have. And I think that's a huge opportunity for brands in this space to update packaging and start getting into that a little bit more. So one of the other things here, I want to make sure to get this before finishing up. We've got honey across the top. You can kind of see it in this picture. Jam is on the right, and I can show you this actually. It's right here. So jam is on the right. It goes completely vertical, the full set here of jam. And then you've got honey across the top of the peanut butter. There were some comments in here about just do honey vertical, don't give so much space to nut butter. So a lot of this really this misunderstanding of how the dominoes play out in this. And at no blame to anybody, like no fault. I'm not to blame anybody, but when you start peeling this back and you start really digging into what that looks like, okay, you have 4 shelves of honey. Again, my assumption here is that this is based, sorry, you have 5 shelves. There's a 5th shelf right here. You have 5 shelves of honey. When you start looking at the space to sales, my guess would be, an assumption would be that this was built off of data saying honey doesn't deserve more than 5 shelves of space. So when you look at honey at 5 shelves, if you were to do that vertically, you would only have about half to maybe 2/3 of a set. So then you still have a section underneath, which is nut butter. You're still doing a combination of nut butter and honey in this situation. The other piece of this, which, sorry, really quick, I don't I don't love that. I think 8 feet is fine to do a horizontal across the top. Over under is what we call it in the biz, and I don't think that's an issue really. I do like vertical when you can get there, but I don't think it's an issue when it's 8 feet. If it was like 12 feet, 16 feet, then it's definitely more challenging for a customer if you're walking across 16 feet of space looking at honey. 8 feet, you can walk up to the set in the middle and you can see everything that you need. So I don't really see an issue with this part of it. And the reason I understand why it is done like this instead of vertical is because, like I said, you don't want to overspace the honey just because you want it to be in a vertical block. You would have to sacrifice either cutting items out or reducing facings on nut butters to get them into a 4 foot space amount of space, and then expand honey, which again, my assumption is that honey doesn't do as much sales as the nut butters. So that's why I feel totally fine with this. I didn't even blink an eye at it. What I thought was interesting was everybody talked about too many facings, too much variety. Should cut it down to 4 feet, reduce how many SKUs you have, get it down to two facings per item. And what happens there is if it's one store, you could totally do that and find some way to expand a category that needs it. However, you're limited to what's how much you can actually do. One, like bandwidth, how much moving around can you actually do? And that comes down to what's on the aisle. We can see jam, we've got tea. What if those don't really deserve the space either? So something along in this run either deserves a space. You can cut down nut butters and you can expand something, but you have to move things around. And the other option is that there's nothing in that run that deserves a space. And you have a section an aisle over or 2 aisles over. And when you want to expand that section, you need to find space for it. So now you have this problem where you're running across different aisles and it's not as easy to, even just in one store, it's not as easy to just reduce one and expand the other. It's very difficult to think about, easy to think in terms of how you could do it on a planogram software of how it would actually turn out, but actually executing it and thinking through the full store format. That's where it can get challenging. So one of the things that was brought up was that a lot of times with mid-size chains, so this new season's 22 stores, you have pretty much some standard set sizes. Some stores might have a 4 foot set, some might have an 8 foot set. If you were to shrink down and say, hey, okay, this category, even in bigger stores, we're going to go to 4 feet. Now you have to do that 22 times. Figure out what did we just do for that one store and how do we do it at every store? And then you have to go and execute it. So it really becomes a challenge, and it is easy to get, I don't know, quote unquote, stuck in, well, we've always had nut butters at 8 feet, so that's the size that it is. And that can happen, it is part of it. But I think that when you get into that larger size, like the mid-size chains, and you have 10 to 20, 30, 40 stores, you're going to run into more challenging situations like that where you can't just do it like that. You can't just make a change. You have to be more strategic with it. And what that really means is probably doing more full store reflows and recategorizing. And that, again, just takes a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, a lot of support from either internal teams or external support teams for merchandising, and it takes time. So I'm sure if you're anywhere in the country near a Kroger or a Fred Meyer, like they do store resets pretty often. I feel like every 2 years at least for any given store. And that just, they have everything built out that way. They have the systems, the resources. They're large enough to support that. And they have brands supporting that. They have brokers supporting that. We just don't have that same benefit when you're in a mid-size retailer like that. We have some of it, but not all of it. And so I just think that's an interesting one. It's easy to say like, oh, just shrink it down to 4 feet, but there's so much more to it. And I just wanted to share that, from a retailer and from a buyer's perspective, there's a lot more to it. And if you were to just cut out the items so that it was easier to shop, then you're in the situation where you have 5 facings for every item, right? Like you just start cutting out items, you can see there's already a lot of items with 2, 3, 4, or 5 facings. Now everything is going to get expanded just because we want to cut it out and make it easier for the customer to shop. And that can be more beneficial operationally, but not necessarily on the sales and, like I said earlier, the profitability. You're missing out on other things that you might not get if you were to have these other brands in here. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I was only going to do this half-hour live stream, so I'm gonna do more of these posts. I'm gonna do this live stream every day. Talk through something. It could be another set. It could be a product review. It could just be me talking about a topic from some of my lessons and some of my previous posts and kind of getting into the nuance. So make sure to stay tuned. And, if I can, I'll lock down a time so it's consistent every day. But it's at this point, I've just got too many different meetings going on. And so for every single day to be at the same time. So it's typically going to be earlier mornings, maybe 8:30 in the morning to like that 10:30 time Pacific. And, if you can, I'd love to have you come on and, be interactive. Post your questions in the comments, and, give me topics to talk about. If you want to send me a DM, happy to bring something up and talk through it. All right, y'all. I'll catch you later.